As Iran says it plans on breaching the uranium enrichment limit set by a landmark nuclear deal, French President Emmanuel Macron tells his Iranian counterpart there will be consequences if Tehran sees through its threat. Greeks head to the polls in the country's first national election of the post-bailout era. Polls predicting big wins and possibly even an outright parliamentary majority for the Conservative opposition. And the president of the Egyptian Football Association resigns after the hosts of the Africa Cup of Nations are eliminated from the competition ahead of the quarter-finals in a shock 1-0 defeat to South Africa. Hello and welcome to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Haxi Myers-Belkin. Thank you very much for joining us. We begin with news we've just received of a car bomb that's exploded in the Afghan capital. That blast has killed at least 14 people, with over 70 injured, many of them school children. The Taliban has claimed responsibility for the bloodshed, this as the militant group is taking part in a two-day conference in Doha that seeks to find a solution to Afghanistan's restless wars. French President Emmanuel Macron has told his Iranian counterpart Hassan Rouhani that there will be consequences if Iran continues to pull away from the commitments it made as part of the 2015 nuclear deal. The two men spoke on the phone just a day before Iran is set to increase its uranium enrichment above the limit set by Iran's agreement with world powers. Tensions between Iran and Western nations have been particularly tense since the US quit the pact last year and reimposed crippling sanctions. Earlier I spoke to France 24's Reza Sayeh in Tehran. I asked him if Macron's phone call is likely to have any impact on Iran's plans to breach that uranium enrichment cap.
That's the big question at this hour, and it's not clear. We have to wait a little bit more than a week. Next Monday is July 15th. That's the day when President Macron and President Rouhani have set a deadline to figure out a way to salvage what's left of the nuclear deal. In a statement from Mr. Macron's office, they both said that Mr. Rouhani and Mr. Macron are going to explore conditions to resume talks, resume negotiations. That's an awfully vague statement. And in a crisis where very few people have been able to solve anything, I'm not sure even that statement has many people hopeful. But again, all eyes on July 15th. We're going to wait to see if Mr. Macron and Mr. Rouhani figure out a way to salvage what's left of the deal and resume negotiations. And on Friday, a senior advisor to the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said that all members of the Iranian establishment are on board, and the enriched uranium at 5% could happen today. So now we wait to see if indeed there's official confirmation that's happening, and we also wait to see reaction from Washington, and especially reaction from the European signatories, France, UK, and Germany.
Polls are open in Greece in a vote that looks likely to hand victory to the opposition Conservatives. Incumbent Socialist Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras stormed to power 4 years ago after vowing to bring an end to austerity, but many now blame him for saddling the country with even more debt. Seeking to take his place, Kyriakos Mitsotakis of the New Democracy Party. A little earlier I spoke to our correspondent in Athens, Natalie Savarakas. I asked her what voters care about most in this election.
It's no big surprise, but the economy, of course, it's something that, has really kind of transformed the country these past years. Like the ruling leftist Syriza was, like a pretty insignificant party 10 years ago. Now it is likely to be the main opposition force in the country when, at the end of this day. But of course, the leader of Syriza, Tsipras, Alexis Tsipras, this young political leader, reneged on his pledges. The Greeks are very upset that he wasn't able not only to overturn all EU policies, he was actually the one to enforce all these very painful austerity measures, making him even for some a darling of Brussels, that he managed to enforce all these very painful measures. Now, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, the leader this conservative force, has promised that, he will lighten taxation, he will manage to promote foreign investment and investment, cut red tape, all key issues, but crucially also focus on the middle class that really has felt it's been completely wiped off throughout this crisis.
Prominent Algerians met this weekend in a seaside resort west of Algiers in an effort to craft a plan that would pull the country out of its current political crisis. The meeting came a day after tens of thousands of Algerians held new protests on Friday, the 20th straight week of demonstrations. Pierre Delrieux has the details.
Opposition party leaders, as well as academics and members of the civil society, were among the 600 to participate in the conference. The goal of this National Forum for Dialogue: come up with a roadmap towards presidential and parliamentary elections in accordance with the protesters' demands.
It's undeniable that political parties and civil society organizations all have an important role to play to clarify visions and perceptions and taking part in the dialogue.
After a day of talks, participants demanded the release of political prisoners and called for an independent body to organize free elections, whose date has yet to be set. The talks were, however, boycotted by a number of national figures, such as former President Yamin Zerwal, former Foreign Affairs Minister Hamad Talib Brahimi, and several opposition parties. Algeria has been in political limbo since a revolt helped push out longtime President Abdelaziz Bouteflika in April. Since then, tens of thousands of Algerians have persistently demanded the removal of the ruling elite.
Dialogue must have a goal. We won't pretend that this document will solve all of our problems, but a future presidency will result in this dialogue we are engaged in.
The conference's roadmap will be submitted to the country's acting leadership in the upcoming days. But some members of the protest movement say it's too early to plan new elections and demand a new constitution, as well as a transition period led by personalities outside the current regime.
Time now for a roundup of the latest twists and turns to come out of the Africa Cup of Nations. One-time favourites Egypt are now out of the competition. It was a stunning last-gasp victory for South Africa on Saturday as they scored the first and only goal of their match against the tournament's host nation just 5 minutes before the final whistle blew. South Africa now progressing to a quarter-final against Nigeria. France 24's Simon Harding in Cairo takes us through that shocking defeat for the Egyptian side, a result that has triggered the resignation of the president of the Egyptian Football Association.
The reaction is one of utter disbelief here in Cairo outside the international stadium. Egypt completely overwhelmed by the reaction that South Africa gave them. No one expected the Bafanas to come out and play the way they did. They took the game to Egypt. They had by far more chances than Egypt did in the game. Mohamed Salah was really a shadow of his usual self against the South Africans, seen walking a lot on the pitch. Twice he put his teammate Trezeguet in a perfect position to score, but twice his teammate didn't beat the South African goalkeeper. And then in the second half, after a blistering quick counter-attack, Lebo Matiba served his teammate Lorch, and he just planted the ball in the back of the net. To be honest, it was over all very quickly for the Egyptians. With 10 minutes left to play, more or less, they didn't have enough time to bounce back into the game. And to come back to the reaction, well, you can probably see it behind me. Thousands and thousands of fans leaving this stadium dejected, disbelieving. They cannot understand what's happened, but more than anything, disappointed with their team's performance.
Now Egypt are out, and so too are the title holders Cameroon. Nigeria scoring twice in 3 minutes to come from behind and win a thrilling last 16 match 3-2 against their rivals. Well, that's all we have time for right now. Thank you very much for watching. There's more news coming up in about 20 minutes' time here on France 24.